Bet the Board.
What do you mean you don't bet? I mean, I don't bet. You know, I don't gamble. I don't. I never have, and I never will. Yeah, right. I'll bet you $20 I can get you gambling before the end of the day.
You owe me 15 grand, pal.
Pay him. Pay that man his money.
It's the Bet the Board podcast.
God likes me. He really, really likes me.
In the end, I wound up right back where I started. I could still pick winners, and I could still make money for all kinds of people back home. And why mess up a good thing?
Here's Payne Insider and Todd Fuhrman.
Welcome in to the Bet the Board podcast, NFL Week 18, where 18 teams in the league are sent packing, and 14 will continue their quest to win the Lombardi Trophy as we get into Wild Card Weekend. I'm your host, Todd Fuhrman, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and co-host, the one, the only Payne Insider. And Payne, this is the time of year where, rubber meets the road. Teams will have to put up or shut up, and we go down to basically one podcast a week from here on out.
Thank the Lord.
I love that level of optimism and engagement for our listeners there.
Yeah, I must have said something. I'm not quite sure what it was.
Famous last
many
words.
People in the comments section. That was a good jab there. There was people in our mentions discussing about how we can't wait to get this season over with. And I don't think people understand how thin we stretch ourselves, especially when you're actually doing this and betting large sums of money, the time you're allocating, and then at least trying to put it in a digestible manner that is entertaining, not so much, informative, very much.
It can be entertaining now and again if we get those properly timed Payne Insider rants. Then yes, it can be pretty entertaining at stretches. So,
just in general, these podcasts between us, you're talking about 30 to 40 hours for each show in terms of prep and then recording and then post-production and finding graphics and all of that stuff. And you guys get it in a digestible manner. That's an hour, and you listen to it, you dispose of it, and move on with the rest of your day. So from that perspective, it's a little bit different from the two sides of the podcast equation. And then, we obviously haven't had the greatest season, but we've battled back like a motherfucker. And that has been pretty daunting. The last 5 weeks for us, behind the scenes have been quite good to where, hey, we're going to be in the black this season, it looks like. So a lot of battling this season, and it's just one of those years where it's just labor intensive, right? You're talking 12, 14, 16, 18 hours a day, and we're getting to that point, and the season is never going to end, apparently. It's 18 weeks now. It could be fucking 20 later. The college calendar is nonstop now with all the transfer portal stuff. So you don't get any time off anymore.
I know you're anxiously, from a podcasting perspective, looking towards the 12-team playoff, knowing what kind of workload that's going to have.
Right.
For,
when the fuck does that going to start and end? It's non-fucking stop. So
it becomes a labor and love, a war of futility, but we do it to try and provide some of the best content we can. And it's why we hold ourselves to a significantly higher standard than a lot of folks who flip on the mics, decide they want to record for an hour and make stuff up on the fly. There's a lot more prep that goes in behind the scenes. We appreciate the interactions, the comments, the questions that we get from all of our listeners. The majority of you are some of the best in the business. There are a handful of you that decide that you only want to try and make your feelings known when things are going south. And at that point, look, don't let the door hit you on the way out is kind of my general philosophy there. When we look at Week 18, we know there are some unique dynamics in play. There are a lot of the teams that have already clinched their seeding and or the number one seeds that'll rest key members of their offense and defense, other teams playing for their postseason lives, teams looking to go over or under their win totals, fighting for jobs, so there are always plenty of storylines to follow. And when we look, there are still 20 teams in Super Bowl contention going into this week, tied for the most with 1 week to play in the NFL since 2006, including strike seasons. And when we look at the NFL, look, this is a league that preaches parity. It talks about going from worst to first and allowing multiple fan bases to have that that level of belief that they too can go from a season that was irrelevant to somehow being atop the heap. And there are a number of teams that have surprised some folks, a couple that we'll get to in this particular program. And there are still 4 division titles up for grabs and multiple playoff spots available. 6 teams, though, we'll lay them out for you, have win and in scenarios. The Buccaneers, the Packers, the Jaguars, the Colts, the Texans, and Bills. They win their game this weekend. Ain't nobody keeping them out of the postseason. Lose, and then you throw yourself at the mercy of some of the other teams in the league. Seeding still very much to be decided. And we may as well start with one of those teams, Payne, that does need a little bit of help, but has put themselves right back in the thick of things, given back-to-back victories. That, of course, being the Pittsburgh Steelers, who go on the road in the division to Baltimore to take on the Ravens, and the Steelers find themselves as a 4-point road favorite. Total down from where it opened as high as 43, now sitting at 35. Credit the betting market, much more sophisticated in 2024 than what it's been in the past. I know you and I were hoping that somehow, some way, we were going to get the Ravens to open as a field goal favorite. You saw some books open the Steelers as a 2.5-point favorite and have minimal resistance to go up through that field goal. The one storyline that I know national media will follow, Brad Allen run it back on Saturday night last week on the Cowboys and Lions, the league doubling down to try and give him one of the marquee assignments this week for the Steelers. And when we look at the way this rivalry has played out, it's been separated by 9 points since Mike Tomlin became the Pittsburgh head coach back in 2007, including the playoffs. Marks the 35th meeting, between Tomlin and John Harbaugh, including the playoffs, second most among head coaches all time, paling only in comparison to George Halas and Curly Lambeau of the Bears and Packers, who matched wits 49 times during their career. And the Steelers, over the last 7 games against the Ravens, they have had the Ravens number, going 6-1, with all 7 of those games decided by 1 score, and only 3 of those 7 matchups were started by Lamar Jackson, make it 3 of 8 after this week. And it was a Kenny Pickett late game-winning touchdown in a couple of those contests. Don't think we're going to see that this week, although you never know if Pickett gets into the game over Mason Rudolph. So, Payne, when you look at the way the market has responded here, clearly it anticipated Lamar and other key cogs of the Ravens being out. But if we jump the shark with the Steelers now a 4-point road favorite in a game where if the Ravens were at full speed would have been well over a touchdown favorite in this spot.
Yes. Very simple.
All right, quick handicap on that one. On to the next game.
Yeah. All right. It's interesting because certainly there's optimism with the Steelers, right? I mean, Mason Rudolph has provided that to some extent, and you start to look at him. He's still in his prime. He just turned 28 in July, and was benched years ago, and he's been a backup for years. And sometimes you get to a point as a man where you're like, fuck it. Like I'm going to be confident, aggressive, put all the work I can in, and it just kind of becomes this mental free roll. And it allows you to, in this instance, for Rudolph, play fast and free, because what's the worst case scenario? Put you right back where you were, right? That's the worst case. Rudolph goes back to the bench where he was able to alert the NFL that he can be a great backup. And so,
to Rudolph's credit, even if he crashes and burns this weekend, Payne, he's proved that he's not QB3 because he's jumped well above the Mitchell Trubisky experience.
Right. And you're just kind of seeing that free roll nature right now from him. And sure, like the Steelers have drawn 2 bottom 10 defenses back-to-back weeks in Cincinnati and Seattle. And yes, like Rudolph has had the complementary ground game to go with it. I mean, Najee ran possessed last week against Seattle, and at no point in the last 8 quarters has the game script ever been anything worse than a neutral state, and the vast majority has really seen, Rudolph throwing from a positive game state. But Pittsburgh, give them credit, right? Scored 30 points back-to-back games, something they haven't done since week 5 and 6 of the 2020 season. And Rudolph, you can just tell with that confidence, he's pushing the ball downfield. Double-digit yards per pass attempt back-to-back games. The adjusted accuracy last week, 90%. He's had 1 turnover-worthy play in 8 quarters. And you see some of the players internally seem to believe in Rudolph more than Pickett, particularly 2 receivers who have been more than 50% of the team's targets and 65% of the air yards in back-to-back weeks. However, like getting back to the main point here, price is the number 1 determinant in any market. And had these teams played last week in this very building, and again, I'm higher on Baltimore than everyone. And let me, kudos to Lamar. Clear-cut MVP. Clear-cut.
You go out there and you sling 5 touchdown passes for our listeners, we will fill the ballot box with Lamar for MVP votes.
Absolutely. You get us home a winner that appeared to be dead and gone. Clear-cut MVP. Kudos to you. Whoever said CMC last week should have been the MVP. Bumbling idiot, that guy, whoever he was.
No idea who you're referring to on that.
No, none whatsoever. So Baltimore's 12 in this game last week. So the adjustments have been made. And now you're looking at Pittsburgh as high as 4. So you're not stealing anything. The market's fully cognizant that the Steelers are in must-win mode. The Ravens are going to sit some key cogs. But I think the interesting part to this is typically when you're sitting key cogs, it means something. And for me, just what we've seen, it doesn't mean the same thing for Baltimore as it does other franchises, right? Like even when the starters don't play, the Ravens organization treats meaningless games like the Super Bowl. It's how you win 24 straight exhibition games, right? You prepare for them differently than everyone else. Yeah, multiple starters may sit, but the makeup, the mentality is to win every game. And I don't think that changes against a division rival that beat you earlier this season when you have the ability to end their season. And Tyler Huntley's been in this position before. And so you've seen pro bettors put their foot down at, the peak price point to this point, which is 4. Where they've got out and value bet Baltimore. Now, I don't know if that's enough to keep this below the 4 as we fast forward, say, to Saturday, standalone game 4:30, no other football games on, and every casual bettor thinks must win for Pitt, and Baltimore's resting guys and has no clue about being price sensitive and what that actually means. Do we get to 5.5 where there's an opportunity to grab 6 minus 15 on the Ravens? Possibly. And then you think about what points mean in a game with a total of 35 because the weather appears to get worse as this game goes on, right? Gusts up to 35 miles per hour in the second half. There's kind of this rain-snow mix throughout as we record, right? That could potentially change, so keep your eye on the weather. But, all of these points do become a little bit more valuable here. So it's Ravens or pass for any professional bettor.
I think
that's just kind of the reality of it, right? It's we long-winded this for about 9 minutes just to get back to what we could have said in 2 seconds.
I think one of the best articles I read, and I wish I remembered which beat writer it was or NFL personality, saying, you know what, if the Ravens wanted to improve their playoff chances, they might be better served to give the Steelers every opportunity to get into the playoffs rather than try and go out and keep them on the outside looking in despite being a division rival. Because I have to imagine if the Ravens were to draw the Steelers in some capacity, it would be a much preferred matchup to taking on the Bills or somebody else. But this is a Ravens franchise, to your point, that prides itself in going out there and playing hard. And Tyler Huntley may want to put something on tape that allows him to get a starting job somewhere else in the league when that time comes. Into the Saturday nighter where things are a little bit more straightforward, win and you're in the case of the Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. And we've seen the Colts open as a 1.5, 2-point favorite. That number has crossed 0 with Houston now a modest 1-point road favorite. Total leaked up a touch into that 47.5 range. We saw one prominent book as low as 46. Others did open right at this threshold. And when you look at the way things will play out here, this becomes the 11th winner-take-all game in the final week of the regular season since 2000 and the first in Texans history. The Texans and Colts had 2 of the 3 longest preseason Super Bowl odds coming into the year. And when we look at the Colts, they won the first meeting with Gardner Minshew stepping in to relieve Anthony Richardson. Minshew finished that game 19-23, 171 passing yards and 1 touchdown to 0 picks. Meanwhile, the Texans looking to accomplish history in their own right can become just the 5th team all time to make the playoffs with a rookie quarterback and a head coach duo, a minimum of 10 games started by their quarterback. They clinched their first winning season since 2019, can be just the 4th team since 1978 when the 16-game regular season schedule started to make the playoffs with prices of 200-1 or greater odds. And when we look at what the Texans have accomplished this year, they've done it even with backup quarterbacks filling in when C.J. Stroud missed some time late in the season. From a trending standpoint, the Texans 7-0 straight up in ATS the last 7 road divisional games, tied for the 3rd longest cover streak in road divisional games since 1970. The injury list long on both sides. Payne, Texans dealing with a bevy of them. Will Anderson, Noah Brown, Jonathan Grenard, and wide receiver Robert Woods did not practice on Wednesday, still early in the week. Meanwhile, the Colts facing some offensive line concerns in their own right. When we look at the matchups to watch here, C.J. Stroud gives this team much more of a dynamic passing attack. I'm not telling our listeners anything they don't already know. We've seen a little bit of balance on the ground. The Colts' run defense has been good. Secondary been vulnerable when we look at the Texans' passing attack against the Colts' defense. A path to success for C.J. Stroud in this particular spot?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it just comes down to scheme, right? This side of the ball has all to do with Gus Bradley, and I think if you're a Colts fan, you hope Gus Bradley has multiple pitches in the biggest game of the season. Has he been working on the secondary pitch? I think we've discussed Bradley specifically in key matchups the last handful of seasons, and we know what Gus wanted to do when he had that ridiculously good secondary group in Seattle. You could get away with playing gobs of cover 3, but it's just far more difficult these days to play that, far more difficult if you don't have the horses in the secondary, and the Colts don't have many horses in their secondary. But yet, Gus Bradley lives in cover 3 at a 60% rate, highest in the league by a mile. League average is like 36.5%, just to paint that picture for context. C.J. Stroud and the Texans offense has torched that type of coverage, whether it was early in the season or down the home stretch. First 7 weeks, C.J. Stroud, 8th among qualifying quarterbacks in EPA per pass attempt against cover 3. Since week 9, number 1. And then you add to the fact that C.J. Stroud has this very large dichotomy when kept clean versus being pressured. All quarterbacks do, but Stroud's delta between the two is larger than league average. So he's graded out QB 27 among 41 qualifiers when pressured, QB 6 when kept clean. Stroud hunts the explosive when he has time. 9.3 yards per pass attempt from a clean pocket. It's the second highest rate in the league. You look at the Colts defense, 26th in the NFL in pressure rate. So right off the bat, if Gus Bradley's going to do the things that he has been doing all season, where you're sitting in cover 3, where the Colts defense is having a hard time getting pressured, it seems like this is probably a pretty good matchup for C.J. Stroud and that Texans offense. So Gus Bradley has to find a wrinkle this week, has to make someone other than Nico Collins beat him as well. We know Tank Dell is out. Noah Brown won't play either. If the Colts lose this game because Gus Bradley's defense got torched playing cover 3 all game and allowed Nico Collins just to go off, you'd think Shane Steichen probably needs to find a new DC this offseason.
I mean, this Colts team, you have to be optimistic about what you've seen with a secondary option at the quarterback position. But to your point, you clearly want to try and see that defense raise its overall level of play when you get a healthy Anthony Richardson back to run the offense that Shane Steichen wants to run. And speaking of that offense, let's see what Gardner Minshew and company can bring forth. We've seen this Houston Texans secondary Payne extremely banged up. They played real well last week, but you see the difference that it makes having Will Anderson's ability to disrupt things off the edge. I don't know if the Titans serve as the best litmus test from defensive capabilities, but one area where Houston has been stout all year is stopping the run, and that'll be tested this week against the tandem of Jonathan Taylor. We'll see if Zach Moss gets some carries as well. But if you're the Colts and you're unable to run it as effectively as you want, do you have the confidence with the weapons that they have in their passing game attacking a Texan secondary that's left an awful lot to be desired over the last month or so?
Yeah, that's the big question. And actually, at the top, you mentioned in passing some of those offensive line injuries the Colts are dealing with. It's primarily center Ryan Kelly and then guard Quentin Nelson. Both are dealing with ankle injuries. Kelly hasn't practiced yet this week. Nelson did get in a limited on Wednesday, game Saturday night. So the practice timeline gets moved forward a day, and part of the reason why the Colts offense has steadied recently is the offensive line's improved. The run blocking under Shane Steichen has improved, right? That's not surprising when you kind of see what's going on in Philadelphia. It seems as though the brains have left town in Philly, and they've found themselves in Indianapolis at this point. But the Colts all the way up to 11th in run block win rate. So having those two key cogs in the middle would be vital for this matchup, as it is already tough sledding on the ground against Texans defense, which you kind of mentioned there. Texans are top 5 defense in schedule adjusted efficiency, stopping running back runs. Number 1 in the league in yards per rush allowed to running backs. Tier Tart was a big get on the waiver wire when the Titans released him about a month ago, right? I know Brett Veach and the Chiefs were hoping he slipped to them, but just didn't happen because the Texans had waiver priority there. So if Indy can't get Jonathan Taylor fired up on the ground, it becomes a one-dimensional Minshew game. Now, you look at the areas of the field to attack, very much, Pittman and Downs should find success if Minshew's on. Pittman in the slot would work, and he's certainly been moving around, primarily an outside guy, but has Steichen's done a good job moving him throughout the formations, and he does find some time in the slot, but outside receivers have fared very well against the Houston Texans. Slot receivers have fared very well. You got Downs in the slot. The Texans defense, bottom 8 in the league defending slot receivers. Wouldn't mind seeing the Colts get their tight ends involved, since the Texan safety position is questionable at best, especially once Ward went down. I think we do want to keep our eyes, because you mentioned Will Anderson having some success last week. Let's think about that one a little bit more. He's missed 2 games, returned in a limited fashion against the Titans last week, played only 12 snaps as a situational pass rusher. Very efficient, right? Did record 6 pressures and 2 sacks in those 12 snaps, but clearly he's dealing with some things, hasn't practiced yet this week. So got to monitor the Will Anderson Jr. situation. I mean, at this point, he has been better than advertised. I know the Texans got mocked a little bit with what they gave up to get him, but I mean, he's fringe top 10 edge against the run, 3rd in pass rush win rate. So at a minimum, I think you're hoping Will Anderson, in some capacity, even if it's just a pass rush role, is out there if you're backing the Texans this week.
I mean, everybody wants to talk about Jalen Carter being the runaway favorite, and he is in the betting market for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I mean, you look at the difference that Will Anderson has made for the Houston Texans, and I can make the case that he is a more valuable cog, basically operating on an island for a Texans defense that was as porous as any in the league a season ago, compared to Jalen Carter getting thrown in along a defensive line that already had some horses and veteran leadership there in Philadelphia. But Anderson will no doubt have plenty of opportunities, even if it's not this week, to earn his merits and accolades as a disruptive force, as a fixture for D'Amico Ryan's defense going forward. So it should be interesting to see where this number goes, knowing that we've crossed the 0. Not gone on to any key numbers, but it does change that teaser window at least a little bit for those folks so inclined to go in that direction. On to Sunday.
Throughout the course of the week, right? Like, you could have had the Texans in an advantage teaser early in the week. You now have the ability to get the Colts in an advantage teaser later in the week. And so, I mean, I think that's how a lot of pro bettors have primarily played this, or they've gone with the scalp and they're going to earn free money here, taking plus money on both sides. But there really hasn't, to my knowledge, at this point, been like a massive true position taken. I think the Texans took from one group, took some sharp money just based upon CJ Stroud being back. They power rate the Texans substantially better than the Colts. Like the one group that it seems to have loved the Texans all season long. You remember that little stretch where every single week the Texans were taking game day money. Same group that bet the Texans this week. So
stay true to your dance partner. You've been with them for 17 weeks. You may as well dance with them on into the sunset. Week 18 as well. Into Sunday slate, Payne, and this is a game I don't think requires a massive breakdown or deep dive by any stretch of the imagination, but it's worth touching on. The Dallas Cowboys, suddenly in control of their own destiny in the NFC East, find themselves nearly 2 touchdown favorites in the nation's capital against the Washington Commanders. You're looking at Dallas, a 13-point favorite, total of 46. This number did open higher at 49, came well below one of the other keys as well when you look where it bottomed out. Weather not exactly going to be the friend of the favorite in this spot, with a nasty wintry mix projected in Landover, Maryland for this game. But when you look at the number, both side and total here, we now know that Sam Howell will get the nod. Jacoby Brissett didn't come back last week with the hamstring, and he's not going to get the start here. Does Washington have enough to play spoiler, or is this more about the odds makers forcing you to pay a premium with the Cowboys, knowing that they can suddenly go from 7-1 long shots to be NFC East champions to overwhelming favorites with one game in front of them?
Really interesting game that's changed a little bit in mentality from my perspective and the guys that I speak with. 13, if you remember, is the same price this matchup closed in Dallas on Thanksgiving. And so now you're removing the Cowboys from, their comfortable home environment in the dome on the turf where they've just been feasting in recent seasons. And unfortunately, like, our hope of Jacoby Brissett being under center is gone. And so I don't have much interest in backing Sam Howell, who's just a negative play waiting to happen. And so we've kind of just been on the sidelines. And since that announcement of Sam Howell, this specific game has had a pretty clean market in terms of, like, it's been 13 for the last 36 hours. It's stayed 13, right? It's just, there's not much movement. And it's primarily because of Sam Howell. There's been 67 quarterbacks that have taken a snap this season. Sam Howell leads the league in turnover-worthy plays. Sam Howell leads the league in sacks taken, right? I mean, the guy is just an absolute negative machine out there on offense. And, you know, you try to put it in context and hope that, you know, you're going to get some fight from the Commanders. That was initially why, like, man, if we could get 14 and Brissett, holy shit, put us in. And Ron Rivera's been horrific, right? I mean, 3 winning seasons in 13 years as a head coach in this league. It's kind of like the Seinfeld skit there. You know, specific one I'm talking about. I'm not going to say it on the podcast because it might come off wrong. But there's one reason he's in the league, and it's because people feel bad for him. And I think that day is coming to an end. But one thing I'd say is, like, the players haven't quit, right? You look the last couple of weeks, they fought hard in L.A., outscored the Rams in the second half, could have quit New York, outscored the Jets in the second half, could have laid down, right, against the 49ers, who were embarrassed by Baltimore. They didn't. They showed heart and effort. Guys were flying around early. I mean, they trailed by 3 to the 49ers 2/3 of the way through that game. And, you know, no doubt that the Cowboys have matchup advantages on offense, but, you know, we kind of gave McCarthy and Dak and the Cowboys offense a pass in losing to Buffalo. Right, I mean, you had Jerry Jones come out and was like, "Hey, this is the best win this team's had in the McCarthy era, and the spot and the situation sucked, and so, no biggie." And then the offense sputtered a little bit against Miami. Okay, right, probably should have scored from the 1-yard line. They were still top 10 in EPA per play that week, but the point was, like, we went into last week and we're like, "Hey, good situation, perfect environment. Lions are down multiple starters in the secondary." Somehow the Cowboys were 18th in EPA per play against Detroit, and the vast majority of that comes from one singular play on a variance down. 3rd and 13, Dak avoids a safety, scrambles, and throws on the run and finds Lamb for a 92-yard touchdown. You remove that high-variance play, and the Cowboys' offense finishes the week bottom 8 in EPA per play against a bottom 8 pass defense of the Lions. So I think, you know, kind of going back to my point here is, like, laying big numbers with an offense that doesn't appear to be in form and not playing in their best environment wasn't overly appealing. Like, we were, again, praying for Brissett, hoping the public came along, gets this thing, you know, to an area where we might not have to dummy the game to 14 before we buy the Commanders, and it hasn't unfolded that way. In terms of the total, very, very early under money at 48, which was primarily weather-based, to your point, and so I think it's fine playing weather totals under on Sunday night and Monday if you're willing to be adaptable, meaning, right, you're playing and hunting middles. Because as soon as we dip to the key of 44 here and the weather looks substantially better now, very sharp over money. And so that's why we're sitting at 46. That's pretty much all I have on this one.
Well, that's still plenty. That's more than I thought we were going to get. I mean, I figured I'd get 30 seconds and 35 seconds on that, so you exceeded expectations there, looking at a game where the Dallas Cowboys can be division champs, keeping an NFC East streak intact with no repeat champions over the last 19 seasons. Since we stay in rotation order more so than chronological on this very fine program, we'll jump ahead to Sunday Night Football for the Bills and Dolphins, where it's Buffalo making their annual trip to South Florida, this time as a field goal road favorite. Total on the game 49.5, down a touch from some books that opened as high as 50.5. The side is up a shade from the 2.5 on the opener. And Payne, the Bills can become the 4th team in NFL history to win a division after they were 3 games back with 5 or fewer games to play. Happened in 2022, a season ago, with the Jacksonville Jaguars completing that feat, the final Sunday Night Football game of the season against the Tennessee Titans. Some projection models had the Bills as low as a 5% probability to make the playoffs when they kind of bottomed out at 6-6. The Bills would clinch a playoff spot with the Steelers or Jaguars loss in this particular spot. A win, of course, allows them to be the number 2 seed. Or at least I shouldn't say 2 seed. I should say host a home playoff game as a division champion. And the Bills have really had the Dolphins number. 10-1 in the past 11 games versus Miami when you include the playoffs. Pasted Miami back in week 4 to the tune of 48-20. And the Dolphins, thereafter their first division title since 2008. It's the 4th longest active drought. Meanwhile, the Bills trying to win the AFC East for the 4th straight season. When we look at the Bills, they've gone under in 11 of 15 road games since the start of 2022. It's the best under record in the NFL. The Dolphins, they've been good ATS in division, 10-2 against the number of the last 12 divisional games. An interesting nugget on this one, according to Vivid Seats, it projects more than half of the fans in attendance for Sunday night's game to be wearing the red, white, and blue, about 52% for their metrics. So we'll see if Dolphins fans show up and can change that dynamic a little little bit. When we look at the matchups to watch here, Payne, we know the Dolphins have dealt with a rash of injuries, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. So rather than starting on one side, going to the other, maybe we look at the number first and foremost and how the market has responded to the Dolphins being down a slew of key cogs and a number of folks that still have yet to practice this week.
Yeah, let's just, you think about a Sunday night football game, you think about Bills-Dolphins, what it means for the division, the AFC landscape. You would expect this massive deep dive, and we can do that, but we've talked so much about the Bills at this point, kind of know what they are. We know what Miami should have been had they been healthy.
Travesty for anybody that's an impartial observer for what this team could have been if they maintained health. I mean,
just decimated. And I think that's the interesting part. But specific to your point on price and maybe market entry is we saw very early in the week, right, Sunday night, quite literally at open, guys were grabbing the Bills because they expected this game to go up, right? So they're laying cheap money lines. They're laying 1.5. They're laying 2. And that's ultimately how we get to 3 here. At 3, you're probably biding your time and looking at the injury report, which, again, to your point, I'm counting this 1, 2, 3,
I think
4,
there were
5,
18
6,
or 19
7, 8,
players
9,
for the Dolphins.
12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 guys on the injury report that were all either DNPs or light practices. You kind of want to see which guys are in, which guys are out. If all things were equal, I mean, the Dolphins are a favorite in this game. And so that's the interesting element to this, where you have sharp guys grabbing the Bills early in the week because they know where the line's going. At what point are we going to see some buyback on the Dolphins for those that said, hey, this game should be Dolphins minus 1.5? And then you're obviously playing the injury game within that, who's available, who's out. It becomes difficult, right? When you look at Buffalo in totality, I know that's been everyone's beloved darling. And certainly they're winning some games. And I think we even mentioned, hey, back when it was 50-1, this probably makes some sense. Grab a little Bills here. And shit, I mean, you look at them to win the AFC. They have a chance to miss the playoffs, and somehow they're 3-1, which is just bizarre pricing to me, but neither here nor there.
Speaks to the liability the books may have accumulated on them.
Yes. We know the new look Bills offense wants to establish the run. And that should never be the game plan against the 2023 New England Patriots, who literally are number 1 in most meaningful run D metrics. So it didn't look good last week again. That's not the Miami Dolphins defense, so I think you'll probably see more success from Cooks in the Bills ground game, especially, Zach Seiler is one of those guys who did not practice on Wednesday, dealing with a little bit of an illness. Hopefully, he's out there. I'm interested to see what Vic Fangio does with the defensive line. Do they just say, hey, we have no clue what's going on with your pass game. We trust Jalen Ramsey a little bit, and so maybe we match him up on Diggs, and we're just going to go and stack the box a little bit. We're going to put, a 3 technique defensive tackle and move him to edge as a run setter, like a guy like, Raekwon Jones, someone like that. So I'm interested to see what they do there. Obviously, we know Chubb is out with the ACL injury. We know Jalen Phillips is out. Xavier Howard, I don't think, is going to trend well. But there's some other things going on, right? I mean, just the offense has looked very, very wonky recently, specifically the throw game. I mean, the last 2 weeks alone against a Chargers secondary, it's putting this nicely, is horrific. And the worst part of the Patriots defense, which is their secondary, Josh Allen in the throw game, 43% success rate on dropbacks. It's 21st in the NFL. There's clearly something going on with Stephon Diggs. We get pretty good information out of Buffalo. Not going to divulge everything. Maybe we do next year in the preview podcast like we did last year when whatever was going on with Josh Allen that we didn't really make.
If Diggs is back in Buffalo,
that's true. He's playing 60% of snaps the last couple of weeks, 65%. He's not. They're saying he's 100% healthy. If Diggs is not there, This is a bottom 10 receiver group in the NFL, and I'm putting that nicely. I was actually exchanging texts with Billy, and he was like, man, if Diggs isn't there, it's a bottom 5, pass catcher group.
I will not stand here.
Nice,
I will not stand here for the Gabe Davis and Khalil Shakir slander that you two are trying to put together.
Yeah, Shakir's a nice weapon, I guess, if he's, he's like your 4th or 5th option. Gabe Davis, fine in stretches. He needs the specific coverage to find success. Josh Allen, not 100%, dealing with the neck and the shoulder thing. So it's just very, very interesting. At the same time, right? Like the other side of the ball for the Dolphins, this is a defense that has given to some problems, and he's dealing a left shoulder issue. He's dealing with a thumb issue. He's dealing with a quad issue. I expect him to play. We've seen Buffalo with the addition of going out and making that massive trade for Rasul Douglas from Green Bay, who's a perfect scheme fit with what McDermott likes to do in zone. Daquan Jones returning up front is a massive get, so he should help, right? When you think about, hey, what's Mike McDaniel going to do? Well, if Mostert's healthy and A-Chain's back and, Wilson's there, you probably want to fire up the ground game a little bit. So having Daquan Jones return for Buffalo in the middle is huge. Hyde and Poyer have been healthier. So the Bills' defense certainly trending in a better direction. Tyreek Hill, right, dealing with a home fire. Just you name it, it's going on right now for the Dolphins. Just everything is.
Look, with Tyreek Hill, the home fire, I got a list of suspects that I'd be going to first and foremost here that I think would provide logical starting points. One receiver comes to mind if I'm thinking about this logically, and that would be one that honed his craft as a member of the Dirty Birds, who shall remain nameless.
Yeah. So, Tyreek Hill has, had to leave Wednesday's practice to attend to that. We know Waddle is potentially a little bit of a longer shot to go in this game. There's multiple guys up front that are playing through their injuries, and it's been a beaten and battered offensive line all season. So that's kind of the dynamic here and why this game becomes difficult. It's that okay, you hop out and get ahead on Buffalo. That's probably the sharp side, under a field goal. Then all of a sudden it's okay, well, this price last week probably was Dolphins -1.5. You start to go through the equation of the injuries, factor those in, and 3's probably a little too much. But I think you said something, not that Buffalo would ever throw this game away because it's for the division, right? They want to win the division, but maybe there's a scenario here where Pittsburgh wins, the Jaguars win, and now this is for more than the division. It becomes the air quotes must win. And the public is rallying around figuring out what they're going to bet on Sunday Night Football. And maybe this is a situation where if you're super patient and there's a guy or two that is not available for the Dolphins, that this might get to 3.5. I don't know. There's been some nibbles even at 3 here, which is interesting to me.
We know guys get itchy trigger fingers, but it will be fascinating to see because we saw that dynamic play out last year. The Green Bay Packers needing to win and get in against the Detroit Lions. We see how that Rams-Seahawks game ended, which was the key domino there. The number artificially ticks up to 5, and that's when we decided we were going to jump in after waiting patiently and watch that number close, a shade under 3.5 there in a game that the Lions dominated from start to finish. One final thing, you mentioned all the stuff on Stephon Diggs, a few numbers to put in perspective here before we move on from this game. When we look at Diggs, and I know he's decimated fantasy rosters, people that were relying on him to try and get him over the hump, didn't exactly pay dividends. 9.3 yards per reception over his last 10 games. It's the fewest in the NFL amongst wide receivers with a minimum of 50 targets. Under 50 yards total in 6 of 7 games. 10 straight games under 100 receiving yards, his longest drought since the 2017-2018 season. And Josh Allen just 5.5 yards per attempt when targeting Stephon Diggs over the last 10 games. That's worst amongst 32 qualifying quarterback-receiver duos with 60-plus attempts since week 6. So plenty of smoke where there's fire as it pertains to Diggs not performing and the Buffalo passing a game really bottoming out, given the fact that, everyone wants to talk about this team and how well they're playing, back out that running attack, and suddenly they don't look to be the team that everyone should fear on the AFC side of the draw. You can follow Payne on...
Absolutely nuts, right?
Look, at price at 50 to 1, it made sense.
I don't think he just got old quickly the way that...
No.
He was started this season, and now you're looking over the past 7 games he's played, he's averaging 37.5 receiving yards per game. He's got 1 touchdown in the last 7 games. So, something weird is is going on here.
That's makes you wonder in terms of what could be transpiring out there in Western New York. But the Bills, to your point, a team that has caught everyone by storm, at least in the betting market, a number that's been crashing for a team that still needs to win to even get in to the playoffs. You can follow Payne on social media at Payne Insider. I'm Todd Fuhrman. You can follow me there. Most importantly, for all things podcast related, you can follow Bet the Board at Bet the Board Pod. And Payne, when we look at the NFC East, another game that takes on a little less importance, but the Eagles, with some help, could still find themselves atop the division. They'll travel to New York as 5-point favorites. Total on the game, 42. Another game where we've seen the total come down amid weather concerns from 46 at the peak. You've also seen the dog take money in this game. 7 is where it opened. That was available for about 37 seconds. 6 more or less the consensus. That didn't last either. But when you look at the number and the price being attached to Philadelphia in this spot, this is clearly an Eagles team that we thought had bottomed out when they went through the gauntlet of a schedule. They decided to tell everyone in the NFL to hold their beer while they blew a double-digit lead to their former defensive coordinator last week as a 10.5, 11-point home favorite against the Cards.
Yeah, we're not happy about that, obviously.
No, nor should our listeners be happy about that. That win total
ridiculous.
should have been in the win column.
Yeah, they've now got 2 wins against the Cowboys and Eagles as double-digit dogs. You don't think in a million years a team that's, at the peak, 13, you would have had to have laid on the Eagles last week. They're covering that number at halftime. You just never envision losing a game like that. So, Geno Smith, here we go, buddy. Never doubted you for a second in my life. A lot of incentives this week, probably the most incentives of any player in the NFL this week. I believe he gets a $2 million bonus for getting the Seahawks to the playoffs. Obviously has a good little matchup there against zone defenses, which the Cardinals play. But back to this game, Giants-Eagles. I think there's 2 thought processes here, Tom. The first is simple, and that's these 2 teams just played on Christmas Day, which is, I don't know, within the last 2 weeks, right? And Philadelphia was a 14-point favorite. It's now just 5 in New York, and the market understands home field, generally speaking, is less valuable than it's ever been. And so because of that, you're catching the Eagles at a depressed price. That's one side of the coin. Is that a fair assessment?
That is a very fair assessment.
Okay. The other side of the coin is that the price 2 weeks ago had Tommy DeVito incorporated, and Tyrod Taylor's a massive upgrade. We've seen Tyrod, right? He's the guy that went into Buffalo and helped the Giants cover that number, lost by 5 ultimately, but came away with 0 on 2 trips to the Bills' 1-yard line, could have easily won that game. Tyrod, the same guy that beat the Commanders. Tyrod, the same guy that covered the number last week against the Rams, although Gunnar Olszewski with the punt return from the heavens last week. He could have timed that on a sundial, I think.
Hey, Tyrod still throws one hell of a deep ball, all right? That's
yeah, he saw that to Slayton. It wasn't even off play action either.
No, put some respect on T-Mobile's name, the pride of Virginia Tech.
Well, where I'm going with this is if you just look surface level and comp out Tyrod versus DeVito, Tyrod's QBR is 48 on the season, 50 as an average quarterback for context. That puts Tyrod in the ballpark of Russell Wilson and Justin Fields this season. DeVito has a QBR of 23, and I'm being nice and rounding up there. If you compare that among qualifying quarterbacks in the QBR era dating back to 2006, only the 2010 version of Jimmy Clausen is substantially worse, right? Like DeVito's played worse than Jamarcus Russell, worse than Josh Rosen. So those are kind of like where DeVito is living. So it's a large upgrade for Tyrod Taylor, and you have to make that adjustment. Additionally, we're now hearing some locker room issues with A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith dealing with an ankle injury that required crutches during the early portion of the week. There's the Sirianni presser from last week where he talked about potentially sitting guys this week. There's some suspicion the Eagles don't love the surface and weather combination of MetLife Stadium this week either. So there's a greater than 0 chance that some Eagles players sit this week at some point in this game. Is it from the onset? Is it at halftime if they're scoreboard watching and see the Cowboys are up multiple scores against the Commanders? Who knows? But it's extremely plausible that some guys rest at some point in this game for the Eagles. And so that's why +6 on the Giants simply didn't last this week. Better numbers were grabbed, 6.5. I think Chris had 7 that didn't last very long. So, this week has an element to where
live betting comes into play.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, certain parts of the game can have value in different directions. If you believe the Eagles' price is depressed and you find out the Eagles at minimum are going to play their starters the first half and then gauge things from there, maybe you're looking at Philly in the first half, whether it be money line or a soft 3. But undoubtedly, like, 2 very respected factions, grab the Giants at no price worse than +6 this week.
All about numbers, especially this late in the season when there are so many unique variables that'll factor into the equation that you try and put a quantitative value on. This game, the perfect illustration. And I think what'll be even more fascinating when we reconvene next week to talk about Wild Card Weekend, should the Eagles be playing in one of those games like we expect, how they're priced in a win-or-go-home type scenario, given some of the inconsistency, and that's probably the nicest way I can put it, for how Philadelphia's performed for the better part of 2 months. When Eagles fans thought it was cute that they found themselves down at halftime battling back, you can only dance between the raindrops for so long because good teams don't have to erase deficits on a weekly basis. Speaking of good teams, Payne, when we look at the Green Bay Packers playing host to the Chicago Bears, I don't think any of us that had over 7.5 wins for the Green Bay Packers early in the year anticipated we'd be able to cash that particular bet with 1 week to go in the regular season. But here we are, and to go one step further, Green Bay has a chance to punch their ticket to the postseason for the second straight year. They're in a spot where it's a win and you're in type scenario against a different divisional foe. Green Bay, a field goal favorite, although the number trending towards 2.5 at some of the more respected offshore operations. Total on the game 44 against a white-hot Bears team that comes into this contest. Although the Packers have dominated the Bears in recent meetings, having won 9 straight games against their rivals from down south, one shy of matching the longest win streak by either team in the history of the rivalry, put together by Green Bay from 1994 to 1998. The Packers have won 14 of the last 15 against the Bears. They've won 7 straight home games against the Bears, last loss coming in 2015 when it was Jay Cutler under center for Chicago. The Packers, well, they would be the youngest playoff team weighted by playing time since the NFL expanded to a 16-game schedule in 1978 if they're able to win this weekend. Most receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns by first- and second-year players in NFL history. And credit Jordan Love, it hasn't been the same consistent cast of characters. It has been a revolving door at the wide receiver position, but the task won't be easy, knowing that the Bears have won 4 of their last 5 games, allowing 20 or fewer points in each of those contests. The Bears 5-2 in their last 7 games and have generated a whopping 18 takeaways over that stretch, including 5 games with 3 or more takeaways in a single game. And Coach LaFleur, no dummy to that situation, knows exactly how difficult this game will be as the Bears try and play spoiler. The Packers 9-0 straight up ATS the last 9 meetings. They've also gone over the total in 6 straight games overall. Paying this Bears team, they're doing it with defense. They're getting enough play out of their offense in DJ Moore. Green Bay steps in defensively, and this has been a stop unit that's left a lot to be desired up until last week, where they put their Mona Lisa on display for everybody to watch. Not sure if they deserve credit for it, or it's that Kevin O'Connell decided to start Jaron Hall in a must-win spot for the Minnesota Vikings.
So you have basically, at least the matchup that probably most people want to hear about is the two forces trending extremely well, about to collide head on. And I think in our last couple Green Bay deep dives, we've outlined the progress of Jordan Love and the confidence he's gained since that Thanksgiving game in Detroit. And he has just been
QB6, by the way, in some fantasy leagues. You'd have told me this dude was going to finish top 10 in fantasy production, I'd have laughed at you, but he was helping people win championships last weekend.
I mean, we remember a time where this offense couldn't get off the ground in the first half. I mean, it was anemic.
First half under, rinse and repeat with the pace of play and Green Bay's awful early game scripts.
Since week 9, we're talking about Jordan Love being QB number 2 in EPA plus completion percentage over expectation among 33 qualifying quarterbacks. And it's not just the production. You can tell the game slowed down for him a little bit. He's getting the ball out of his hands quicker. He's willing to take that check down. He's more comfortable navigating the pocket as well. I mean, there was a play last week where, he drops back, he scans middle, scans right slot, scans right side, comes all the way back around and just dumps it off to the left side to Aaron Jones and, picks up 7 or 8 on an early down rather than, taking the sack or forcing the ball deep down the field rather than going through the progressions. It was wild to watch. But at the same time as Jordan Love's improvement, the Bears defense has improved by leaps and bounds, right? They're stopping the run, something that we've mentioned they've done all season long. They're 4th in schedule adjusted rush efficiency on the year, number 1 in EPA per rush allowed since week 5. Chicago's also been very good preventing explosive passes, top 5 in the NFL. Jordan Love also likes to throw with play action at a well above league average rate, 15th out of 44 qualifiers in play action rate. The Bears, top 5 defending play action passes. So this is really a very good matchup. We did see Jaden Reed leave the Vikings game with a rib injury. Christian Watson hasn't played since week 13 with that nagging hamstring injury. There was some good information there that the Sunday night crew dove into about what the Packers are going to do in the offseason in terms of Christian Watson's, hamstring injuries that seem to plague him throughout multiple seasons. Now, Dontavius Wicks left the Giants game on that Monday night with a high ankle sprain. All 3 practice on Wednesday for Green Bay. It's a great sign. I would think because of the magnitude of the game, they'll all try and go. I would envision none of them are 100%. Now, keeping things fair, we do have to keep an eye on the Bears' lead cover corner, Jalen Johnson, left after 20 snaps against Atlanta with a shoulder injury. He's looking for a deal. This game is meaningless. So let's see if he's out there. But it's possible we get this matchup where, both the Packers secondary and the Bears, the Packers wide receiver group and the Bears secondary aren't at 100%. I think the area where Green Bay should look to attack, and we can kind of go all the way back to the opener with these two teams, is getting Aaron Jones matched up out of the backfield on the Bears linebackers. Now, for whatever reason, I guess because Jaden Reed's been so prolific underneath and in the short areas, it's kind of taken away from Aaron Jones to pass catcher. But you really want to get Aaron Jones lined up on these Bears linebackers. We saw what he did in the first game with that explosive touchdown on the season. The Bears are dead last in EPA surrendered to running back passes. 102 receptions allowed for 973 yards and 7 touchdowns to the running back position through 17.
Tyler Algier is still running.
Yes. You didn't think that pass was thrown to him.
No, I was hoping that pass was thrown to Bijan Robinson.
So the reason we've seen some Bears money, aside from everyone playing for their job, right, Eberflus, Justin Fields, is the Bears defense has been quite formidable. The Packers defense has not, to your point there. The Mona Lisa was last week. The injuries have certainly been mounting for Green Bay. Yes, it does look like a few key cogs will return, specifically Jair Alexander, which is huge if Joe Barry's smart enough to have him travel with DJ Moore. I would think that would be the case because some of the Bears' weapons or the weapons that Justin Fields likes best are a little bit dinged up, right? You have Mooney going through the concussion protocol. You got the tight end there we like, whose name is slipping my mind. What's his name?
Cole Kmet.
Cole Kmet, yep. So he's been banged up. So you would say, hey, let's go have our elite cover corner, one of the best players on the team, shadow DJ Moore and make Justin Fields throw to someone else. And even during this stretch of play where Justin Fields has looked competent, I wouldn't quite say a franchise quarterback.
Speaking of which, I want to get to that in a second.
I'll
let you finish your thought process there, but I want to come back to that.
He's not like humming in terms of like throwing the ball. It's been very much, feasting on explosives, and the down-to-down success hasn't necessarily been there for Justin Fields as a passer. So, what Green Bay defense are you getting? There's other injuries on that unit that are pretty impactful. But, you're looking in totality, Green Bay's a bottom 5 defense despite facing one of the 7 easiest schedules of offenses this season. So, I don't think the problems were solved because they look good against Jaron Hall. We're still within 30 days of Bryce Young, Tommy DeVito, and Baker Mayfield looking like premium quarterbacks against this Packers defense. So that is why we have seen some Bears money into the market at 3.5, which was where the main sharp buy was. We're now kind of seeing it trickle down a little bit here. There's certainly some public sentiment backing the underdog here as well. And so, yes, if you say to yourself, I love the Bears, I want to play the thing straight, there's certainly some flat still out there at 3. I think if you're a pro bettor at this point, you're talking about a consensus number on a podcast, you're probably going with the number 2.75. And at that point, you're like, hey, let's just let this thing trickle down to 2.5. And if I do like the Bears, you're coming back and putting them in an advantage teaser through the 3-7. That's kind of my thoughts on this.
No, it makes a world of sense. And you talked about Fields, some of his struggles down to down. We see the highlight reel plays, his elusiveness, and the Bears in a good position, albeit some difficult behind-the-scenes choices they're going to have to make with that number 1 overall pick. Do you feel that they're going to move on from Fields at this juncture, and that or it's going to depend on how they see Caleb Williams, how they see Drake May as the potential franchise-changing talent, knowing that you could have a team like the Giants, like the Patriots, like the Commanders that could offer a king's ransom even more than they were able to accumulate last year, which has paid dividends when you look at everything that trade to the Carolina Panthers has meant. DJ Moore, the headliner, but Tyreek Stevenson and some of the other big pieces that they've been able to pick up. I mean, the Bears won that deal going away.
Yeah, and that's why, the big trade, Ryan Poles is obviously going to keep his job now because of that trade and what it means for this organization moving forward. In terms of Justin Fields, I think our thoughts on him are well chronicled. I mean, we've made our point about him last season. We had a long, drawn-out discussion about his ability in our preview podcast. So, listen, I think the Bears need a new offensive coordinator. And then you are going to go through the process of evaluating Caleb Williams and Drake May.
Yep.
Now, our thoughts on Caleb Williams are out there. Very much, played a lot of backyard football this past year. I believe the arm talent and ability is there if you can get him to play somewhat within structure. You don't want to take all of the improvisation away from Caleb Williams because, that's what he's really good at, but you want it to come just when the play breaks down and it's absolutely needed. You still want him playing within structure. I understand you can get more for the first-round pick than you can Justin Fields at this point, but there's a reason for that, and it's because of the upside it would deliver to a franchise if that quarterback that they pick comes to fruition. I think you've built up the defense to a point and you have enough resources financially to where you can put other pieces around a number 1 overall quarterback if you were to move on. And that's the way I would personally lean, because at this point, what Justin Fields is. And to me, you can say he's fine, but I think you'd be lying to yourself if you said, hey, I think this guy is a franchise quarterback, that he's on the level of Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes or Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow or any of the other elite quarterbacks in this conversation. I mean, hell, I think if you silently polled 32 organizations, they would all, not all, many, the overwhelming majority would take Jordan Love.
Oh, 100%, given what we've seen in his
right?
maturation this year as his first season as a starting quarterback.
I mean, you look at QBR, something that incorporates the leg element of a quarterback. Where did I tell you Justin Fields was? He's somewhere in that Tyrod Taylor range, right? Which is, bottom, you're looking at like quarterbacks 20 to 32 in that area. That's where he's been. And that's incorporating the legs. I mean, I think he's a fun quarterback to watch. He gives you hope on every single play. I mean, we saw a play last week where the game swings completely because of his legs. It looked like he was sacked 3 different times. He somehow picks up a first down. As I look at this, and I just queried it, let's look at this. This is really bad podcasting, but I'm going to do my best here to go through this. Okay, so since week 10, you're looking at the Bears' schedule of defenses faced. It was Carolina, and certainly as a whole, pass defense better than run defense, but their corner situation was pretty much decimated in week 10, right? You had the Detroit Lions secondary. You had a Minnesota defense. It's kind of been smoke and mirrors, right? We're going to do all these fancy things that Brian Flores is doing where we're sending a ton of heat. We're showing some sim pressures, but we're actually playing zone. You got the Detroit secondary again. You got the Cardinals defense. You got the Atlanta defense that's been downtrending with all the injuries there, specifically Grady Jarrett. The only good defense you've played since week 10 is Cleveland. And yeah, you look on the scoreboard, be like, hey, we should have won that game. Yeah, we got a defensive touchdown. You got another defensive turnover that took you down to the 1 yard line. I believe it took Justin Fields 4 fucking plays to score from the 1. So where I'm going with this is since week 10, you're looking at quarterback 45 among 55 qualifiers in passing success rate. There is no pass element for him. The only pass game there has been for Justin Fields is finding DJ Moore. And we saw that early on in the Atlanta game where we're just hitting explosive to DJ Moore. There's no other element of the down-to-down consistency from Justin Fields in this pass game.
Then there comes a time where you have that cap space. You have other draft capital where if you take a quarterback first overall and the Bears feel they need to trade down with where their pick will land more so than the one that they acquired from Carolina. It's an interesting situation for sure.
Yeah, go get your quarterback that you like, right? Whether it be Drake May or Caleb Williams. You have your defense figured out. If you ultimately keep Eberflus, you have a shit ton of money. You can get some draft capital for Justin Fields. I think you have to make the decision a little bit earlier, right? You can't have both quarterbacks on the roster and then try to trade Justin Fields because you have no leverage.
No, you lose all your leverage.
Right. So you can't make paper mache moves here, right? You got to be pretty focused and saying, hey, we're moving on from Justin Fields. We're going to start searching out those trades Monday. Right. And that's where we go from there. That would be my move. And if you can get a third rounder for him, you can get a second and whatever it is, right? You're going to get some assets back for him. Obviously not as much as the first overall pick. But I think if you can get the right OC in there and you get Caleb to play within structure, right? It's the asymmetric risk game. The worst case scenario is you lose some draft capital and Caleb Williams is Justin Fields. I don't think he's that. Or you have the potential to hit the grand slam and you have one of the 5 or 6 best quarterbacks in the league just based upon his talent. And the talent is evident with the arm strength, the being able to throw from different platforms, the mobility. You just got to get him to play within structure a little bit more and get him to buy in. And I think, seems like a good kid from a good family, just needs a little bit of a reality check. I can't tell you what I would have been in LA at age 22.
I mean, I have a pretty good
in my pocket in a Lamborghini.
I have a pretty good idea of what that would have been. It wouldn't have been a pleasant experience for anybody in and around your inner circle.
Yeah. Yes. So that's the direction I would go.
Makes sense. And I know a lot of Bears fans have been interested by all of this, so your opinion carries a ton of weight with them in terms of how you would go about building the franchise back up, knowing that they may be a lot closer than they think in a division that suddenly from top to bottom appears to be much more competitive with a team in the Green Bay Packers that has their quarterback of the future and a lot of young pieces to be excited about. The Lions, a clear trajectory, and the Minnesota Vikings remain the $100 million question in terms of what they're going to do at the quarterback position, given the carousel that they've gone through this season, not really having paid dividends in any regard. Final game real quick just to touch on, and I know we hit on the AFC South at the top of the show with the Houston Texans and Colts on Saturday night. A lot more clear or a clearer picture of the way things were going to go. Jaguars, Titans, the Jags, a 5.5-point road favorite for their trip to Nashville to close out the regular season. Total on the game sits at 40. Jacksonville put together their best defensive performance of the season last week. Josh Allen, a one-man wrecking crew against Bryce Young. We know CJ Beathard got to start, but it was the Jags defense that allowed them to comfortably cover as a 3.5-point road favorite, winning that game 26-0. This game all about the status and availability of Trevor Lawrence. When you look at the market here, Payne, are there anything interesting that it's telling you thus far?
Well, I'll leave it on you. Is this the one?
You got a coin in front of you to try and figure out where we're going to go? I mean, we can make it the
You're not supposed to say that. You're not supposed to say that.
I say the part out loud that people are thinking. No,
he's kidding.
I'm kidding. Trust me, we have much more deliberate debates before we get to that portion of the program, and probably a lot longer than it should be, given the 40 hours of prep that each of us put into recording these programs.
So I don't buy that Christian Kirk is playing this week. I know most of the well-respected injury doctors that are actually doctors in real life as well, performing surgeries on other humans.
Oh, Jesus.
Were
off the top ropes with the people's elbow.
Had a best case scenario of Christian Kirk returning for the playoffs. And I would say just because the first part of the 21-day window opened doesn't mean Kirk will be out there. And if he's not, we know Agnew is now out as well. So the slot option is extremely limited. Trevor Lawrence, I believe, is going to try and play. The guy's tough as nails. He's going to need an injection to play, though. I think he tries to give it a go. The quotes from Lawrence yesterday weren't overly confident or positive, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but he effectively said, certain movements bother me more than others.
Are you hurt or are you injured, Trevor?
Yeah. There are things I can do, and there's some areas where I have total normal strength and it's functional, but in certain positions, there's aggravation. Missing last week's game meant it was a little slower than I would have liked it to be progressing. But it feels decent today. It's getting better every day, so I'm just trying to be cautious. So we know that Trevor Lawrence did not practice at any point last week. He practiced yesterday, but in the portion that was available to the media, Trevor Lawrence did not throw. Mike Vrabel has been very fiery this week in his pressers, and it's very possible it's this team's last ride together, and you can end your division rivals' season.
Much like they ended yours a season ago.
Yes. Revenge is a dish best served cold. I expect effort in this spot. Now, past the narrative stuff, we've talked about Jacksonville downtrending for over a month now. Defensively downtrending. Getting healthy against Carolina and that throw game, I don't necessarily know if that means things have been fixed. Additionally, my number just doesn't get me here. Even having Jacksonville at this very moment power rated as an above average team without Kirk and Agnew and a less than 100% Lawrence, along with the Titans being a bottom 7 team in that like New England ballpark, we make the game 4 on a neutral. And so the Titans getting 5.5 at home just seems like too much value to pass up, especially when you start to factor in like the asymmetric risk. We're at 5.5. If a less than 100% Trevor Lawrence gets announced in, where does this go? 6?
Yeah.
Right. I think the line is pretty much saying they expect Trevor Lawrence to play, but we know how the market works when it gets up. When Schefter sends out the tweet and it goes onto the Don Best screen, right, there's probably going to be a little flicker up to 6. If he does not go,
crashes.
Like you're looking at soft 3, right? Like 2.75 probably. So you're playing that asymmetric risk game. Is like there's 5.5 out there. If you have some great outs, you can get 6 minus 15 right now. Worst case scenario, the thing goes to 6 flat. Best case scenario is he's out and the thing, dips to 2.75. So it's kind of what I was asking you here.
Yes, let's go right.
The one. Do we want
to go?
Okay.
Right where we were going. I just want to hear you lay out the case like you're the judge, jury, and executioner here. So we'll segue seamlessly because we are consummate professionals around here.
Yeah. So, I mean, there was a couple we were debating. And let me just kind of throw this out here. Like, we're recording this podcast on Thursday, and this is kind of the hilarious part of this. Week 18, you're typically wanting to bet like Sunday, Monday, getting ahead of some of this stuff, or you're waiting until Sunday when some of these things have been a little bit inflated. Here we find ourselves in the middle of the week. So we just kind of broke this game down in the thought process there from Price. And so I think, let's go with rotation number 474, the Tennessee Titans, plus the 5.5. If you have great outs, you have multiple outs, which you should all have at this point after a decade of us preaching that to you. If you can get 6 minus 15.
And multiple sportsbook partners for this program over that decade as well.
Yes. So, that's the way we're going this week for the best bet. There's some other things, as Todd was joking around about flipping a coin, that are in the offing. I think, maybe it's best to wait on those. You're kind of, again, catching them in a weird spot in the middle of the week where I think, potentially a number could present itself a little bit better later in the week. So, for the purposes of this, Titans +5.5.
Let's do it. Mike Vrabel, last ride. Make it happen. Go out there. Spoil the party. Throw a wrench into the Jaguars' postseason plans and exact a measure of revenge for what got away from you last year with the Josh Dobbs experience down there in Jacksonville, played under the bright lights on Saturday night. All right, my friend, Week 18, we officially close up shop on the regular season. For those loyal listeners who have been with us for the last decade or so, no Monday shows during the playoffs. We'll be with you every Thursday until they crown a Super Bowl champion, breaking down the games in the kind of level of detail that you're not going to find anywhere else in the podcast space. If you are a college football fan, though, you don't have to wait until Monday to get a full breakdown of the Washington-Michigan National Championship. That show will be delivered to your inbox on Friday, so you have a chance to listen to it over the weekend as we talk all things Kalen DeBoer against Coach Harbaugh and what we could see between Michigan and Washington fighting for a national title. Anything else you'd like to share with our loyal listenership, words of advice, wisdom, as it pertains to attacking the funky Week 18 betting market?
No. Back tomorrow, a random and odd Friday podcast for college football. Brad will be with us, so make sure you're tuned in. Look for that around, lunchtime tomorrow.
Yeah, we may have to try and talk Brett into a little brief FCS breakdown as well and hear how highly rated he has South Dakota State, who will look to try and win back-to-back national championships at that rank. And speaking of college football, Payne, I know a program we talked about before we jumped on, their starting running back announcing he is entering the transfer portal. So for all those folks in Oxford who thought Quinshon Judkins was going to be their bell cow back, apparently the money may have run out a little bit sooner than they anticipated in old Oxford, but more on that potentially down the road. So best of luck this weekend to all of you, our loyal listeners. Thanks to those that have tuned in, whether it's your first episode or you've been with us since all the preseason previews. Plenty of win totals hanging in the balance. Some sweats in store. Let's hope the gambling gods smile fondly upon our investments, but more importantly, with a Tennessee Titans ticket in hand come Sunday afternoon, we'll see you at the window.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Bet the Board. Make sure you follow Todd and Payne on X. Todd is at Todd Fuhrman. That's TODDFUHRMAN. And Payne is at Payne Insider. That's PAYNEINSIDER. Don't forget, our weekly newsletter comes with an additional best bet. Have that delivered to your inbox by clicking the link atop the podcast show notes. And most importantly, subscribe and download Bet the Board. We're on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Wondery, YouTube, Google Podcasts, and all your other major platforms.